Hi everybody, welcome to Book 2, Night 28 of the Orphan's Tales Live Quarantine Reading Series. Well, this has been just one of the most god-awful weeks I've had in a long time. I have my first white hairs just from this week. But it's had its magic too. So we've had, more bad news in our family, which I'm not really at liberty to share, but I need people to stop getting sick. I need everybody to be healthy. And we had a COVID scare at daycare, which turned out to be negative, but we lost all childcare for the week and therefore all work. And then, as many of you, possibly all of you know, my cat decided to not follow that I need nobody to get sick rule. And we nearly lost him. We still don't know what's wrong. We still don't know if he's going to pull through. But thanks to my incredible internet community, we were able to pay for a blood transfusion and treatment and hospitalization. And hopefully that treatment worked. I'll let you guys know. And Heath got his recording booth funded. So our lives are going to get a lot easier when we can have that thing and he can work like normal hours instead of 2 to 6 a.m. So there's been good and bad, but the stress level has just been intense. But thank you so much to everybody who gave a crap about my he's not little, about Lord Byron, who is the most wonderful cat in the world and is currently really unhappy that I'm down here doing this because I have not been allowed to leave physical contact with him all weekend. He assures me that's very important for his recuperation, and he will literally die if I stop touching him. So we have a half an hour where I'm allowed to be away. But I have done all of CapClave, a convention. I was supposed to attend in person and attended virtually, but I've done it all with Byron in his cone of shame in my lap as I feed him wet food and tell him he's a handsome boy and try to help him get better. And that's been my weekend, and we find out on Tuesday if the treatment worked and what's going to happen from there. So it's just been a whole lot. And I'm so grateful for everyone who was there for us, and helped pay for it and helped me emotionally get through it. So, I'm not through it yet, but you guys have been amazing. So thank you so much. So yeah, we're getting really close to the end of the book here. To which end, remember we are skipping Wednesday so that we can make the ending line up with Halloween a little bit better. And yeah, it's crazy that we'll basically have gone Easter to Halloween with this thing together. It's pretty extraordinary. I hope everyone else has had a far better week than I have, and that everyone in your life is healthy and safe. It's probably asking a little too much from 2020, but I do wish it for all of you. And let's get moving. Bunnies to bones. Oh, very well said, Heath. So yeah, let's get going. Let me do my intro. We will hop into the reading, and then we'll do questions afterwards and talk about nothing and everything as we always do. And I just now realized I forgot to get myself a drink. Well done, self. Oh well. We'll have to suffer through. As always, you can say it with me at this point. As always, this is not an audiobook of the Orphan's Tales. This is a play, a one-woman show. You can find music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can find copies of them at your local independent bookseller's web portal or physical bookstores if you're comfortable, and they are comfortable with that. If you would like to support mine, it's printbookstore.com in Portland, Maine. You can find me on Twitter at Catherynne Valente, howling into the void. You can find me on Patreon at Catherynne Valente as well, and subscribe there. Everything is just a little bit late this month because the whole thing with Byron has been just so upsetting, and so many other things have happened this month. October is really on my last soul point, so things will be a little late, but they're coming. And You can ask questions, as I said, after the reading, but please try to think about what you want to talk about before I end so that we don't have any awkward dead air. You can catch up in the archive at Catherynne Valente Live on YouTube. And, thank you. I have not forgotten a drink. I have been given a drink. If you are so moved and would like to toss a coin to your witch, don't. You guys have been amazing to us this week. And if you would like to tip me and support me and make sure this reading series keeps going, what I would ask is that you go over to GoFundMe and find a trans person who is trying to save up for their surgery. No one of them deserves it more than any other. They all fucking deserve it. So I don't want to highlight any particular person's campaign. Go find someone and give them the money that you might give to me so that their lives can change the way that you guys have changed my life. A different way, but in the same magical internet strangers way. So if you want to tip me, that's what I would ask you to do this week. Let's get started. The tale of the cage of ivory and the cage of iron continued. He closed me up into it, said the little grass star, and latched it firm. I sat upon his mantle until he died, his finest possession, his art, his beauty. Perfect, pristine, eternal, licked by lizards and fondled by a man whose hands were rough with soup stirring. When he died, his old mother-in-law took it into her family and passed it down and down and down. And I suppose someone must have taken it to this red and ghastly city. Probably stuck it upon some duchess's dresser and called it a pretty little trifle. I do not know. I fell asleep. I did not care to know. In the dark I was at peace, and I could pretend that I was home, that my mother would see me shining even through that awful box, that she would know I never meant to burn anything. Let me go back to sleep. Let me go back to the dark. I have been leached dry and shrunk into a ridiculous mannequin crowned in a box and left on a sill for centuries. I have done enough. I blinked back my awe. But you could go back now if you wanted to, I said. I am tired, she said, and her seed eyes glistened. I am a djinn, you know. I came from, well, probably not you, but from some stars burning. I am not sure, really. The others haven't cast my kindling yet. But we are distant relations, one might say. The grass star looked at me stonily and said nothing. Scald, Solace said, looking up at me with pleading eyes. You can't give her to them. The best thing they'll do is put her on another mantle. Grandmother, I said slowly, though the grass star scowled at the name. Will you let me carry you? Just for a little while. When has anyone ever let me choose? Now, I am letting you choose. Scald of no particular family, the Ember Queen of the Djinn. Because, you know, the dark, I held up a palmful of my soot-riddled hair, is something of an obsession of ours. We rose like smoke. My tail trailed after me and my silver basket shook, buffeted by the wind. In her carnelian box, Lee curled around herself and did not speak. I could see the tips of her silver feet peeking from the hem of her reed dress. The air grew cold, and I drifted higher, to the tip of the siren's tower, to the tip of Agenab, where her outstretched fingers reached the furthest. And there I held gentle green-shouldered Lee in one hand and touched the dark sky, the last gasp of dark before dawn, with one flaming finger. The scent of scorched air flowed out from the puncture, and I cannot say whether it was because my fire is terrible, or because I wanted it so fervently, wanted her to rest, wanted her away from Kohinoor and the army of kings and queens, wanted her home, that it blazed as hot as a wish might have. The dark opened around my finger like a square of silk, dropped over a candle, and I worked my hand into the flaming night, widening and stretching the dark around me. It felt like skin, and I choked, I wept, My throat froze, but I took her from her box, Lee, one of a million seed-blown stars, and folded her into the night like a child tucked into her bed. She looked at me, disbelieving, and she did not smile. I wish she had smiled. I wish I knew that I had done well by her. But she simply breathed deeply and closed her eyes, and the dark closed over her. In the garden. Well after midnight, the torches still blazed and the snow pooled and watered around their polished stalks, quick little crows hopping forward to drink. The moon had set. Outside the halos of fire, it was as dark as dreaming. In the still of the outer garden, there was so little sound, no frogs, no geese, no hooting wolves. The flowers were dead and icy, the trees naked and hard. The stars were silent on the snow. The girl opened her eyes. The blackness vanished from the boy's throat even as she did it, and he stopped in mid-sentence. "Come away," she said. "Come away from here. I don't want to be near them, your family, your father. It is almost over. I know it." "We are safe," the boy said, pointing through the waving branches at the far-off dancers, far-off children laughing and throwing brandy-soaked green grapes at one another. "No," she said. "Come to the gate. Come to the edges. Come to the snow and the iron." "If that is what you want, it is." He took her circlet from her and let the scarlet veil fall onto the ice. She brushed flakes from her hands and lifted her heavy skirts, turning away from the light and the sound behind the chestnut boughs. The boy took her hand. "Wait," came a soft voice behind them. Dinarzade stood there, in long yellow veils, her every finger ringed in emerald, her waist bounded in red. The children turned to look at her, but again Dinarzade did not speak. She lifted her own veil and looked with mute pleading at the girl, her eyes dark and desperate. The girl let go her friend's hand and crossed the snow to the older woman. She looked into Dinarzade's face as in a mirror, and slowly took the Amira's long, glittering fingers in her own chapped, cold hands. She took a long breath, frightened as a hare who does not know if she has or has not seen an arrow in the mist. "I think," she said, softer than light, "I think that one morning the Pappas woke in her tower, and her blankets were so warm, and the sun was so golden she could not bear it. I think she woke, and dressed, and washed her face in cold water, and rubbed her shaven head. I think she walked among her sisters, and for the first time saw that they were so beautiful, and she loved them. I think she woke up one morning of all her mornings, and found that her heart was as white as a silkworm, and the sun was clear as glass on her brow, and she believed then that she could live and hold peace in her hand like a pearl." Tears slipped warm and grateful down Dinarzade's lovely face. Her lips trembled, and she folded her arms around the girl like a mother, like a sister, and kissed her frozen hair. She let her go and drew down her yellow veil and returned to the dais, but every so often she glanced back over her shoulder into the dark and the branches, into the garden. The girl wound her hands in the iron gate. She looked into the deep woods beyond the palace grounds, where she had never ventured. Her fingertips were pale as mushrooms, and she could not feel the ice. Shadows pricked in the trees outside the gate, shadows and starlight, filtering down through leafless boughs and stiff black needles. She closed her eyes and tried to quiet her heart. She turned to the boy, her black eyelids blazing as though they burned her, and whispered, "Come, tell me how it ends." The tale of the cage of ivory and the cage of iron continued. The carnival of the dawn sang with 100 open throats beneath the gentle shadows of Simeon's elbows. When I returned to Orphea's courtyard, Solace and Lantern had gone before me and left me to find my way by the sounds of drums and flutes, trumpets and lyres and pipes and shouting, the sounds of so many voices. It was not difficult. I rounded a tall lamppost whose capital was shaped like a fish, mouth flinging a spume of flame into the air, and the cobbled street below the wall was alive with folk, alive with ajans, and the colors caught my eyes like hooks. Jugglers tossed iron pokers and scarlet flowers and the occasional child into the air. Fire-eaters swallowed their trade. Masks were donned and removed. And there I saw Arioso pulling the edge of his jackal face away to the delight of a young boy. But I could not tell what was underneath. Painters leapt madly at Simeon's back, throwing pigment against him with the abandon of mating herons, their hands a bristle of frenzied brushes. The sirens flicked their wings at the wall, inscribing it with their own blue ink. Even in penance is beauty. Blessed are all the oceans drowned. Singers stood in clusters around trumpeters and pipers, voices high and low echoing by, and the howling and the keening and the barking of countless creatures. A woman with a parrot's green and scarlet head cawed out the hours, and a man with a tiny wolf on his shoulder howled a duet back at her. And the dancers. The dancers. Everyone danced, a flurry of arms and legs, leaps I could not begin to follow in the throng, and Agrafena dancing and playing amid them all. But she was modest after all things, and many others played louder, danced faster. Near a fountain that trickled water from the mouth of a fox-faced woman, there was a girl all in red, dancing with a man in a green coat, whose legs were like those of a gazelle. And she wound her long black beads around his throat while he bit her gently on the cheek. A red lion cavorted at their side. Spiders leapt from lamp to lamp, trailing iridescent webs behind them. Did one have needles for legs? I could not see. But there in the center of the square was Lantern, his tail flaring and flaming, and within its snapping ribbons danced Solace, her eyes shut in ecstasy, stepping deftly between the orange-red feathers, throwing her arms out, her head back, her black tattoos glowing wet and bright in the glare of her father's light. When Agrafena stopped to shear a frazzled thread of her hair away, the two of them rested, and Solace ran to me. She was soaking wet from head to hip, her hair plastered to her skull, wrapped around it in long ropes. Her skin was slick and slippery. She looked down at herself and giggled. Folio made this stuff so I don't burn. It smells a bit sour and bitter, like old beer, but it works. I'm only a little pink when I finish. I used to blister terribly. I showed her the empty box, and she nodded. I think I might have stayed there. I might have walked through the carnival with a child's hand in mine, eaten apples doused in cardamom wine, and told her how once, when I was very young, I had seen the old queen dancing in her lonely hall, her embers red as bleeding, and I thought she was so beautiful then. I thought she must be so happy. I might have done those things. I might have even declined to drift back through Simeon's hands and ridden out the siege with the Ajans, cowering in corkscrewed streets. But a deafening sound cracked open the wind, and then another close behind it, shredding the last threads of blue night and letting the sun in, letting the fire in. For the fire did come, bellowing up before the wall, black and scarlet and vast, and a sound like the ocean. All our faces were lit by it, blanched and white. Solace hid her eyes in my waist. There was another terrible sound, another gout of fire shooting up into the dawn like a dragon being born. And then there was a worse sound, a crying, a snuffling, an awful sobbing as Simeon began to bleed, began to weep, began to call out to Agrafena, terrified and alone. Agrafena took up her bows and began to play a slow, gliding lullaby, all blue and silver and kind, and she did not cry at all, not at all. The Ajans rushed forward to put their hands to Simeon, to whisper and stroke him and press their cheeks to his back. I went to him too, and put my palm, split by flowing fire, to the inside of his thumb. Let me go, I whispered, and his fingers parted for me to pass through. On the other side of the wall, I could see the army with their proud plumes, their raven and their swan helmets. their horses with chests belted and bolted in bronze, their shields with 1,000 seals and crests I would never remember. I could see Simeon's brass eyes lonely and afraid, trying not to weep louder than he already did. Kohinoor stood some ways off from me astride a great salamander. We have little enough choices in mounts, and salamanders are sweet as kittens, really. They do not mind the smoke. They bear their saddles with grace. His beady eyes flicked between his mistress and me, and his skin glimmered like an oil slick. Beside her were all the others, Camille the Hearth King, his one eye glinting, and beside him the Kindling King and the Tinder Queen with her blazing yellow face, and the King of Flint and Steel with his sparks snapping in the wind. Behind them I saw the wispy white smoke of the Kaigal, anticipating punishments before the day was done. Catapults lazily flopped forward and back, empty. They were angry. It was not difficult to see, though a djinn looks often angry, even when she is asleep. It seemed wise not to let them begin the lecture or the execution, and so I spoke before she could. I spoke standing in a wreckage of shattered terracotta, splattered in oily, viscous stuff which burned like a queen's hair. "I have it!" I cried, and held up the box in my orange-lined hand. Kohinoor goggled. "What? How can you have it? The Ajans would never give it up." "The Ajans never knew what it was, you old fireplace. But I have it, and I will give it to you if you do not hurt the poor wall further and go home like a cat who has played all night and now hears the breakfast bell ring." The Ash Queen's eyes narrowed to grey and smoky slits. "Give it to me, and then we shall see." I had not been queen long enough to be cleverer than she was. She drove her salamander forward, her hair streaming behind her like burning trees. I put the red, gleaming box into her hands. She snatched it away and turned her back to the others, as if to keep it for her own, to look first into it and to share the honor with no one. She did not howl with rage, or scream curses on my name, or strike me with her black fists. She did not even look at me. "Where is she?" she said quietly. "She's gone. She's home. She's beyond you or Lem or Kashkash or any snarling tiger. She is safe." Kohinoor shook her head. "How could you?" She half sobbed, hurt stitching her voice like a dress. The Ash Queen's Tale. Do you know what you must have to become the Ash Queen? As you have your hair, and Camille has his low and lovely voice, harmonious as two nightingales singing together. Nothing. You must have no fire at all in you. You must have no spark, no breath of scarlet, not the slightest shuddering sigh of embers. You must be cold and grey and hollow. And so I was. I blew on my hands endlessly, hoping for light, hoping for warmth. I did not want to be queen. I wanted to flame. I shivered always. I was thin, an orphan, a burnt, discarded branch. Do you know that without fire you cannot wish? I doubt you even thought of it, but it is true. I wished so hard when I was a child. I wished for everything I could think of, but most often I wished for fire. Eventually, in my desperation, I wished without letting Nikaiga ascribe it in his book. I wished for a bird to love, to hold in my hand, with a blue head and wings of ice. I wished for the briefest life of all djinn. I wished for a mother, a real mother, with fire in her eyes. But still I was alone and scrabbling in the ash while other children blazed on the boulevard of Barrow like ridiculous, idiotic fireflies. Someone noticed the smudge of black against the carnelian wall, and I was made queen before I was 2 years old. There was no competition. No djinn had been born dead of flame in years. I sat alone in my alcazar, inching closer to the fire, trying to catch a sleeve of flame. Camille was as newly crowned as I. He was entirely perplexed as to what to do with the vast hearth that was the central hall of his palace, and I tried to help him. Those born to fire are so often useless with it. I helped him to keep it clear of ash, to keep it banked and ready to keep the black streaks off his brass pillars. He told me wild stories about his wishing exploits. He loved a woman in the north with horse hooves and blessed her with an unfailing orchard of limes. He loathed a man who stole 3 of the green fruits and cursed him with never-ending hunger. I flushed black with jealousy. He mocked me, mocked my lack. He told me tales about the wind gins and the water gins, and I had no idea what he meant. Who raised you, girl? Gin that come from star-burned winds, gin that steamed up from star-scalded oceans. We all have our tribe, everyone knows that. And now that we've libraries to ourselves, we can discover just exactly who is who. Imagine. I could know the very name of the wind that bore my grandfathers. No one raised me, I mumbled. My mother burned out bearing me. My father wished himself after her. Camille started. That is not approved. I smiled wryly. Well, what can they do to him? Well, let's find out who you are, then. Where you come from. Genealogy is such a lot of fun. I looked at him dumbly, rather taken aback at the idea that poring through a lot of old books with more dust than pages could ever be fun. But then it probably was for them. The excitement of knowing that at any moment a stray lock of hair could ignite the whole library. But the pages would stay cold and pulpy beneath my fingers, and I would smudge them black. I followed him into the vaults of my Alcazar, for where else would we keep such fragile records but in the cold and the black in the halls of my house? We are obsessive about records. How can we be otherwise? We live such a brief time, and it is so easy to forget. The library was draughty. Its ceilings were high as the topmost branches of a sandalwood tree. The rafters were blasted black with forgotten fires, with the handprints of the djinn who had once hollowed out this place, when Kosh was made of dirt and daub instead of carnelian and brass. Those scorch marks mocked me, howled their derision in the high, screeching voices of white-eyed rats. There were no shelves, only iron grates which may have held an evening's fire, but instead held books, old and dead. The djinn do not write fanciful tales or epic poems of valor and sacrifice. What glory is it when one flame consumes another? No more than that which graces any pile of wood and scrap of spark. Kosh forbade us to write of any exploits but his, and the poets tired quickly of that. Thus our books are few and precious. I ran my fingers over them and tried to ignore the insult of the rafters. The pages were fine as ash, made from the skin of salamanders, and the words were charcoal. Camille, who hovered over me as I read, played with my sleeve. I curled a tendril of smoky hair behind my ear and looked backward through the books, back and back, parents and grandparents. Names I could not pronounce, while Camille exclaimed in delight if he saw a djinn that connected us, that made us cousins, if 100 times removed. As I pored into older books sewn together from ash and soot, I saw my ancestors shrink, become drier, become hotter. I saw them wither back into the grass they had been. I saw them blow seed and wave in a wheat-scented wind, and I saw a star fall with broken feet. I saw her stumble weeping through a field, and I saw shadows fly up from her footsteps. Camille's eyes widened, tears trickled down my face. Mute salt water, not fire, not flame. I cannot even cry like a djinn. But that's Kosh's book. That is his line. You're descended from the same skull of the same star. I think that makes him nothing. It makes him nothing. Didn't you listen to the king of flint and steel when he told you Kosh is nothing? He was the burning scrim of oil on the trash of our Shaduki towers, and I am nothing like him. I slammed the book closed. I did not want to know. I did not ask to know. And in the days to come, Camille learned not to ask me about it. I may lack flame, but I can smother the fire of any of them in ash. Only once did he put his hand to my hair and tell me he had fire for both of us, that he would make me burn. I put my hand into his smoke, and he felt my cold, He felt the softness of ash falling on his heart and shuddered and did not suggest it again. But as I drifted through my own halls, as my pillars grew grey with ash, I could not forget the grass star. How sad she had seemed in the beautiful illuminations, rimmed in fire on the page, her eyes flaming tears, real tears of naphtha and boil, how her poor broken feet had bled on the grass. Did I come from the blood or the tears? Did I come from her shattered stumps, or did I come later, when that man had wrung her out and she was as dark as I? Did she touch some insignificant blade of grass with her last pathetic press of light? Did some sickly, flameless shadow issue, and was that my grandmother? In my dreams, the grass star spat at her husband, and her saliva rolled itself into a pale and bloodless baby who cried for her, though she did not hear, and that sodden child was I. When I did not dream, I searched the books of the gratings and the blasted vaults for her, where she might lie now, a deathless star at the core of the world. Camille was worried about me, his flames making soft. While I slept on the finger-scalded floors of the vaults, and blind, grey-clawed doves pecked at my hair, he hovered like a grandmother, twisting his beard in his hands. "Kohenor," he said one night, when I knelt by a grate whose claw feet had rusted red as heart's fire. "Let me help." He swallowed, his flame eyes wide and dear. "Let me wish for you, and I will take what punishment the Kaigal can find in their white tails." He took my hands, and I looked up into his face, bright and eager as a young salamander in his first saddle. "I just want to know her, Camille. She ought to be here in Kosh, with her children, seated on a cushion of silk like blue fire, hearing their voices sing new songs, songs which make the ears glow. She ought to be piled with red jewels and red fruits and held to the bosom of so many jinn who would love her. She would put her hands to me and I would burn. I would have her silver fire licking at my ribs, and we would sing together at the dark at the beginning of the world." My eyes ran with their hideous salt tears, wet and colorless and useless. Camille put his painted palms together and raised his eyes to the rafters. The rats squealed and ran, and on a golden grating we had never seen before was a book of such colors that in that blackened place it seemed a peacock among sparrows. It was bound in lambskin and malachite, its pages written in clam ink, the story of a carnelian box and a crocus farmer who kept it in her family down and down the years. But flowers have poor memories, and the book only knew that the box had passed out of its own home country and into some lowly, unkept city at the bottom of the world whose towers were red and hideous and never deserved her. The next day, the Kaigal took Camille's eye. And we will pick up there next Sunday with the penultimate section of In the Cities of Coin and Spice. So I do remember a funny little bit about that section. So when the first Orphan Tales book came out, it got a really nice review in Kirkus, which is still quite hard to get. Kirkus is mean and hates everything. A venue after my own heart. And so everybody kind of braces themselves when the Kirkus reviews comes in. And I got a starred review in Kirkus that turned out at a convention to have been written by Tobias Bickel, who is a writer many of you probably know. And we were laughing and talking about it. And he said that his work was not very much like mine, but that he had loved the Orphan's Tales a lot. And his work had more explosions in it. And I said, "I'll tell you what, Toby, I promise to put an explosion in the second book for you." So that explosion is for Tobias Bickel. And you know, may it warm him. Is the man who cursed with endless hunger the same man who ate his wife alive? Yes, it is. And the answer to any question like that, is X the same as Y, is almost always yes in the Orphan's Tales. But yeah. Thank you for saying that I read nicely. I like I like the villainous parts. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask? You can ask about Byron if you want. Everyone has certainly earned that. Okay, well, I will do my outro. If you have questions, you can pop them up into the chat, and I will answer them when I get done. As always, this has not been an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales. It has been a play. You might not think so, but it is. You can find music based on this book at sjtucker.com. You can find copies of them at your local independent bookseller's web portal. Mine is printbookstore.com. You can find me on Twitter at Cat Valente. You can find me on Patreon at Cat Valente. You can catch up in the archive at Cat Valente Live. This chapter will probably go up tomorrow. And don't forget that we're skipping Wednesday next week, so we'll be back here on Sunday, same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel. And if you would like to toss a coin in the witch's hat, as I said before, please go on to GoFundMe and find one of the many trans folk who are trying to scrape together the funds for their surgeries. You guys were completely amazing to us this week, and I would really love for you to take anything that you would like to use to support me and use it to support somebody who really needs it. If you do that and you send me proof, I will thank you on the next stream, as I normally thank people who tip me. Yeah, the Batman thing was announced this week. It says, please speak on that. So I actually can't talk too much about it because they are really tying us down on those spoilers. But I will say, so it's an audio drama. It's 8 episodes, so it's almost the length of a novel. It's structured like a television season, and it's written by me, Marty Cahill, and Martin Cahill, and Kay Arsenault Rivera. It is, as you can imagine, with something that I conceived. It is extremely confrontational as to Batman's socioeconomic status, and confronts a lot of issues of the 1% and the nature of Gotham and caped crime fighters. It's a little deconstructy. Zatara is sort of the other major player in the story. They've kind of got a Mulder and Scully vibe going on, and I don't think I can tell you even any more than that. I've asked if I can talk about the villain that we're using, and I haven't even gotten an answer from it, so I can't really tell you any more than that. It's supposed to come out spring 2021. We're very much on track to have it ready to go by then. I don't know who is going to be narrating it. I don't have, there's not a lot of information I'm allowed to give out. And this time, since I'm working for not only Serial Box, but like DC and Warner Brothers, I'm going to respect that I'm not allowed to talk about this stuff. Somebody asked, have I had a chance to watch anything fun to relax recently? Not really. I started sort of remote binging Love Island, the UK Love Island, with a friend of mine, which I have seen the first 3 seasons of before, because the last time I was so stressed out that I couldn't handle even like the barest narrative. I hate to admit that I got a little addicted to Love Island, mostly just because it's very anthropological to me. Like, it's almost science fiction. I've just never been like that hot or that dumb or that straight. Like, I just don't understand it fundamentally, and so it's fascinating to me. So I've been watching that with Laura here. Hannah is very nurturing. She's totally a Liverpudlian fishwife. I do kind of love her. And other than that, I've been rewatching some West Wing. I actually, honestly, I have hardly watched anything this week. I've been so stressed out all the time. Like, I just curl up in a ball at the end of the day. It's not good. It's not good at all. Like, when I don't even have a comfort show that I'm watching, it's in a bad way. I watched SNL earlier. We watch SNL every week. This is an SNL household. But I just don't, I've just been flattened by the last many days. So I will try to put on a narrative show tonight, but I'm a bad consumer of culture at the moment. Do I have a favorite comfort book? You know, it's funny because I used to reread books all the time, and I don't really anymore. I have so little time to read, and so many books that I have to read, and so many friends' books that I want to read, that I don't really reread much. But it used to be Dune, for sure. I have read Dune an obscene number of times. Like, it always surprises people, but I have read all 6 original Dune books. We do not speak of the sequels. At least like 20 times. It's a lot. I'm sure Fairyland is comfort reads for a lot of people, which is really cool. And we saw Water Gins, Marids pop up there. I didn't remember that I had included that. So yeah, we saw Saturday's people make a little cameo appearance there. Yeah. No, I just, The Hobbit kind of is. I feel a deep sense of comfort and peace, even just reading the first few pages of The Hobbit with the seed cake and Gandalf coming to tea. I feel like I could get the whole hit of comfort reading just from reading the bit with Gandalf coming to tea from The Hobbit. I don't need to read the whole thing. But yeah, I don't know. I've been sort of trying to figure out what it is that comforts me lately, and I don't have a lot of good answers. That's cool for a pandemic year and an upcoming election, right? Not having any self-soothing mechanism, like that's healthy, right? Yeah, yay. Well, either way, I'll find something eventually. I do read a lot of, books to my child. They are not very intellectually stimulating for me. He likes them a lot, though. Yeah, this is fine. This is fine to not have, literally any place where I can put my desperately compartmentalized anxiety and fear and grief. Not even a crappy show to soothe it. Heath has just said harpoon in the chat. That is because one of Sebastian's favorite books is Jennifer Adams did a series of board books that are like classic novels boiled down into some kind of educational thing for kids in a board book, and he loves the Moby Dick one and has all of it memorized. So he says, my barely 2 years old says anchor, harpoon, captain, a whole host of nautical terms. Somebody said, what's his favorite current book? So actually, I would not say it's Moby Dick anymore. It's the Sherlock Holmes one. I have heard him reciting it as I leave his room to have him go to bed at night. It's a sounds primer, so it's kind of the Hounds of the Baskerville just boiled down to the signs. So it goes hounds howl, thunder rumbles, gates screech. But I'm a bit of a performer, so I ham it up and do the onomatopoetic thing. So I say gates screech. So that's what Sebastian does. I don't think he knows the word screech can be pronounced another way. So he will read it. He'll go, hounds, howl, bumble, gate, screech. It's so cute I could die. And then there's one that says boots scrape, and I always scrape the page and whisper it. So he scrapes the page and goes, scrape. And it's just the cutest thing ever. And I bang on something to make the clattering sound for the wheels clatter page, and he looks around for something to clatter. He was reading another book today, because he has it memorized. And we got to the part where the baby gets tickled. He tickled himself, because I always tickle him. It is absurdly cute. But yeah, he recites it at night. He started reciting it while he was FaceTiming one of his aunties today, and yesterday. She just looked at me like, what is happening? I was like, he is reciting the sounds of Sherlock Holmes, the son of an audiobook reader and writer. So it is adorable. So I would say that that's his favorite book right now. There's another one called Little Penguins that he just adores. And it's just a little story about a penguin family, and they get dressed up and go out into the snow and then get too cold and come home and put on their jammies and eat cookies and drink milk and go to bed. But he loves it, and he knows several words on each page. But I can ask him at any time, how's the snow? And he goes, deep. Because that is the answer on the page. I could talk about my son for a very long time, but I would say that the Sherlock Holmes book and Little Penguins are his current favorites. He calls them pengies. It's incredibly adorable. Sorry, I love my kid. What can I say? He's super cool. Any other questions? Okay, well, I will see you guys next Sunday night, where we will, to make this all work out correctly, we have, let me do the math real quick. So we have 41 pages to go. So we will probably do 20, or maybe a little less than 20 this Sunday. And then we'll do the last of it on the 28th, which will bring us right up to Halloween. Bunnies to bones, as was said earlier. And then, I don't really want to give this up, so we'll figure something else out that I can do for a weekly reading, and move on, God, I hope, into a better future. Thank you all for being with me for all these months. We have done something pretty amazing. It's going to be 1,000 pages of reading out loud that we have done over the course of this lockdown. And of course, the lockdown's not going to be over, so I can't really quit. Got to do something else for you. So I'll figure out what that is, and we will continue. But the 28th is the last day of the Orphan's Tales. I'll see you guys next week, and I will hug the kitty for all of you, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Oh, someone said it's kind of your comfort mechanism. I'm so glad. And you know what? I know that it's partly mine too, because when I stopped between the two books, like my soul took a big dive. So like having to look like a human being and, pretend that I have any kind of social capability on a regular basis during all of this has done a lot for me. So thank you for helping me, and I'm glad that I have helped you. I'll see you on Sunday. Night, guys.